Good morning. I'm mad. The Peanut Conference, the Peanut Growers Conference, invites all these speakers up here to talk about all this interesting stuff. Gamma rays, carbon stuff, and nutrition and whatever. And what do they take old Dan up here to talk about? The most ornery, ostentatious, and just downright ridiculous subject in agriculture today, and that's labor. You know about labor. You know, you hired 3 guys last week, and they're supposed to come and report on Monday, right? So 2 of them come. No. In this fantasy world of mine, 2 of them actually showed up. All right. So the first one, of the 2 that showed up, one of them done come back from lunch. The other one says, oh, by the way, I have to take tomorrow off because that's the day I have to go talk to my probation officer. Now that's where we are in agriculture today as far as labor. Did you notice that the 2 ladies who did a good job on school nutrition both talked about shortage of staff? Shortage of staff is a way of life in the United States. And right now in agriculture, it's pretty critical. So what we're going to talk about today is Dan's going to tell you how to have some labor on your farm. And since you're in the peanut business, the labor shortage doesn't just exist on the farm, but it also exists in the buying point and the shelling facilities. So this is all what peanuts are today. We're going to talk about some staffing shortages there and some ways for you to mitigate that shortage. 2 minutes. H-2A is a government program basically that allows you to bring workers from a foreign country to your farm to do farm work as long as it's a seasonal business and as long as you don't displace local workers. So there's some other rules about it we're going to talk about in a minute. But basically H-2A is for farmers to find labor if you have a shortage, if you just can't find enough people to do the work on your farm. The government allows you to bring workers from a foreign country. Most of those foreign workers in agriculture come from Mexico, and now a good deal of them are coming from South Africa. The South African workers are very good at driving that $450,000 tractor. They're good at using the combine that costs $250,000. And sometimes you're just reluctant to put a new worker onto $750,000 worth of equipment. So these guys that come from South Africa have been using that same kind of equipment. That's what they use down there. They've been the operators. Their season is opposite of yours. So they may be a farmer in South Africa operating all that machinery, you know, a John Deere 8N, an 8R, 8RT, all that stuff, all down there. So they've used it for their farming operation. Then they come here to the United States and use those same skills and so forth. Now, what is farming? Peanuts is actually an agriculture product, and farming, agriculture, is if it's on the farm or by the farmer. So on the farm, you have things like tilling the soil, tending the soil, cleaning up after the harvest, planting of the crop, spraying chemicals and so forth on the crop to make sure that the peanuts grow and that they are viable at the end. They harvest the product. All those things on the farm is agriculture. Now, peanuts change their form from agriculture to something else sometimes when they leave the farm. For example, when the peanut buying point, if they come and get your peanuts off the farm and take it to the buying point, that buying point is not necessarily an agricultural entity. So H-2A won't work there. Sometimes it will. So what I'm saying is if it's on the farm or by the farmer in conjunction with the farmer's own operation, it's agriculture. And agriculture is eligible for the H-2A program. When I first started doing this, the H2A program took about 60,000 workers a year. Well, we're up to 300,000 now in the H2A program, workers who come from Guatemala, Mexico, South Africa, and places like that to do farming operations. And on the farm, you know, I told that little story about the three guys, but it's a true story. It's very, very difficult to find farm workers right now. Why is that? Well, you know, I'm baffled by it. Where the heck did everybody go? Everybody, if you look up and down the strip here on the beach, every business has a help wanted sign on it. Where are all these people? And now farming, except for operating that 8R tractor with the air conditioner, is hot, it's outside, it's dusty. So now instead of going on the farm, they may go to Atlanta, where there's 200,000 construction jobs available, and they pay up to whatever, but they start at about $20 an hour. So I'm just saying, farm help is getting harder and harder. On the H2A program, several farmers can actually group together and bring several workers, and those workers can work at all the farms that are on that one work order. Now let me caution you about H2A. H2A is not something for you to just dabble in and try to, oh, let's just try one worker here and there. It is not going to work for you that way. If you get into the H2A program, you must absolutely immerse yourself in the laws and rules and how it works. And number one is, do not displace local workers to bring these agricultural guest workers in. The government doesn't like that. In Mississippi, there's a lawsuit right now against some growers who use South Africans to do their work, and the local workers said, wait a minute, why didn't you use us? We're qualified, we've been here, we wanted those jobs, and you brought in these South Africans. So the first thing to think about is hire the local worker if they're qualified. Now if they're not qualified to operate an 8R tractor, then maybe you can bring in some foreign workers to do that. If there's nobody available after you've looked, you can bring foreign workers in to do farm labor. So if you're not in a group of farmers on the same order, your H2A workers are not allowed to go to anybody else's farm. So here's what happens, and I'm going to give you the way to get out of that. You've got a bunch of farm workers over there who are hard workers. They're working hard every day, and your brother-in-law is looking for help. He's got to have some people to harvest that crop. And so he comes to you and says, hey, I know I'm not in this H2A program, but can I use your workers for a couple of days? I really need them. Well, no, they can't work there. They can only work for you, but it's your brother-in-law. So what are you going to do? Here's what you're going to do. You're going to tell him, I want you to call Dan Bremer. And if Dan says it's all right for these workers to go work for you, even though you're not on this on the work order, then we'll do it. And you know what I'm going to say. And I'm going to give you my cell phone number in case you have any questions. My cell phone number, I don't care if you're my client, not. I was a farm boy. I grew up on a farm. I own a farm now in Eccles County, Georgia. The farm used to produce peanuts, but now we have hay on it. So I went from a profitable crop to hay. Isn't that just like a farmer? Anyway, so 229-834-2706. If you have a question after this is over, going home, if you're out on the beach thinking, dang, I remember what Dan said, let me ask him about that. Just call me. I'll take your call and I'll answer. Now, as we talked about H2A, for all those things on the farm. Well, let's move on. Secondary agriculture. Remember I told you about the buying point. Now, there's all kinds of different buying points out there. Some buying points are actually owned by the farmer, and they're on the farm. And so that farmer gathers all his own stuff. The Agriculture Inspection Service comes in and inspects it. He dries it. He conditions it, and so forth on the farm. That is still eligible for H2A in agriculture. There are buying points that are owned 100% by the farmers who bring their stuff there. Now that kind of a operation could be H2A if you make an association out of it. So if you come together as a group of farmers and you form an association, not a co-op, an association, and we do this all the time at AgWorks, form that association, then they can be H2A and bring H2A visa holding workers to that kind of an operation. Most buying points aren't that way, but we have talked with a lot of buying points over the last couple of years, and they can be converted to that. The only thing is that all the farmers associated with it would have to have workers' comp. And let me just say, if you don't have workers' comp, you don't really think about getting workers' comp. Workers' comp is an exclusive remedy. If somebody gets hurt on your farm, they can collect workers' comp, but they can't collect your farm. Just something to think about. But they would have to have workers' comp, and that sometimes is a hindrance for forming that association. What are the Okay, so I talked about the association, and you can read on this, and I believe that the service, Mr. Zimmerman, will be putting this all out on the website for the Southern Peanut Growers Conference. Okay, so these are for the associations. The H2A requirements are you have to house the workers, and it has to be government inspected housing. So if you have housing, you can do it. If you don't have housing, you can't do it. You have to have government inspected, reliable housing on your farm or somewhere for these people to live. You have to pay an adverse effect wage rate, which then makes your minimum wage in Mississippi $12.45 an hour, in Florida $12.41 an hour, and in Alabama and Georgia $11.99 an hour. Now that's not probably that far off from what you're already paying somebody. You have to also pay the travel to get here from their home country. If you're bringing a South African to drive that John Deere tractor, you have to pay their way from South Africa to Alabama and then back to their home country again. You have to pay some costs with the government, so forth. You have to apply somewhere about 90 days out. So if you call Dan and say, hey, we're going to start harvesting on Monday, can you send me a couple of South Africans or a couple of foreign workers under the H2A program? No. 90 days. 120 is better. So for this coming year, if you don't have everything pretty much set, you're just SOL, sure out of luck. Anyway, so next year, you see how it goes this year. Next year, if you need workers, this H2A program will work for you. It's been working for a long time. A lot of people have really built their agricultural enterprise on the H2A program, so it will work. You have to have free inspected transportation. So most farms now, if you're providing transportation for workers, if you're taking them here and there and wherever, the vehicle you're driving must be inspected by a mechanic, and the government has a little form for that. Now, if you're not transporting workers, they don't care what you do. But if you're transporting workers, you have to have a little form filled out that you inspected that vehicle, that the driver actually has a driver's license. So you might want to check that when you get home, that the people transporting your workers, do they have a license, and is your vehicle up to snuff? And if you're in H2A, like I said before, you'll have to participate in the workers' comp. H2B. H2B is for non-agriculture. Your buying points, for example, that probably aren't agriculture because it's not on the farm by the farmer for such farming operations. The agriculture stopped as soon as it got to that buying point. They're eligible for H2B. If they're a seasonal business, they can bring the workers under the H2B program. You still have to pay their way up, you have to pay their way back. You do not have to house them, but you're probably going to have to find some housing somewhere for them. You can't just bring foreign workers to the United States, they get off the bus, and you tell them, hey, go find you some housing. It doesn't work that way. You're going to probably have to take care of that. H-2B may be your answer for that. There's a problem with H-2B, a big one. Only 66,000 workers a year for the whole United States can come under the H-2B program. Now, I'm not going to give a political speech, but somehow or another, we're allowing 300,000 foreign people from all over the world across our border every month, but the government will not get off of this 66,000 business here. I could probably put 66,000 people in the peanut business, but they won't get off of it. Now, they give you a little bit here and there like the government always does, a little here, a little there. So we're probably up about 90,000, but we have somewhere over 300,000 applicants from employers wanting to utilize the H-2B program. H-2A, no limit. You can bring all you want. There's no limit on H-2A agriculture workers. Where are we here? H-2B requirements, I think I already went through that. They're similar. You have to pay the government fees, pay their way here, and so forth, so on, all that. Seasonal. Agriculture seasonal is not too bad. You know, you prepare the soil in February, you plant somewhere April, is that about right? March, April. You harvest down in September, mid-September, and so forth. And pretty much after that, your need for extra workers is gone. And then next year it starts all again, February, March, April, May, June. That's less than 10 months. So anything less than 10 months in agriculture is good. Same thing for H-2B and your buying points, shelling facilities and like that. They have to be done in less than 10 months. Buying points, that probably work. Shelling facilities, and you correct me if I'm wrong because there's all kinds of different ones, generally run year round. So a shelling point is more difficult than a buying point. Buying point's generally seasonal, agriculture seasonal, that'll all work for. But the shelling points, maybe not. The next slide, and I've got some extras of this slide with me if you want one. I've just come up and get it. But this slide basically shows you what's agriculture, what's not agriculture, what qualifies for H-2A agriculture, what qualifies for H-2B, and how you get your workers with one of those, and what don't qualify at all. So if you want that little colorful thing that staff did for me, I've got some copies up here. Okay, we've got about 5 or 8 minutes left. Here's some other issues in peanuts. So the cotton gins got it over you guys. The cotton gins got a separate notation in the IRS rules, and it's called 3121G, that allows them to have agricultural H-2A workers at a cotton gin. Now, a cotton gin looks a lot like a peanut buying point. People's cotton comes in from all over, they do stuff to it, and then it goes out the other end to wherever it goes. They are eligible for H-2A, where the buying point for a peanut is not, all because your lobbyists didn't get you into that back when the cotton people were lobbying Congress. So, you all have Bob Redding. Anybody ever heard of Bob Redding? Bob and I are working on this. We're trying to get peanuts into 3121G. If we can get peanuts into 3121G, and y'all gonna have to help us, I think that'll work like cotton, where we can bring H-2A workers with no cap on H-2A workers. We can bring them to the buying points. We've got several ways that I can bring H-2A workers to buying points now, but you kind of got to convolute it a little bit, which I'm pretty good at. Anyway, so if we can get that peanuts into 3121G, we've bypassed that one problem. Here's another one, overtime. Now on the farm, by the farmer, agriculture, there is no overtime. Once that product leaves the farm, unless we've formed one of those associations of farmers and so forth, overtime applies. So if you're associated with anything off the farm, overtime applies. And I find a lot of people think that a peanut is always agriculture all the way up until the time that the child eats it in the lunchroom. That is not, it is, but it's not by the government. And you know, the government has its own silly little ways of doing stuff. No offense, Mr. Corbett. Yes, sir. You know, he's an Auburn graduate. He got his undergraduate and graduate degree from Auburn University. My daughter, who graduated from Jeff Davis High School in Montgomery, Alabama, decided not to go to college and went to Auburn. Oh, I'm going to catch it for that one. And by the way, do you know how you tell a Auburn funeral procession? The lead tractor has its lights on. Uh-oh, I'm going to get it for that one too. Okay, got to get back to subject, I'm sorry. Overtime. OSHA heat regulations. The government, the Biden administration in association with OSHA, put out new heat guidance for farmers. And they prefaced it by saying this has to do with global warming and equity. Now let me tell you, there's no more serious issues in the United States than those two things. And if you're a farmer and you don't have a good protocol for heat avoidance, heat treatment and so forth in writing, they're coming. OSHA is coming to your place. If they've not been there in the past 40 years, they're coming on this heat stuff. And what it has to do with is, I'm going to just read it to you. You need to monitor temperatures and humidity. Schedule heavy work and tasks requiring personal protective equipment, cooler hours of the day. I've got this up here for you if you want it. Acclimate workers gradually to hot temperatures. And what that means is if they're coming in at the heart of the heat season to do harvest work and they're out there in the sun all day, I'm not talking about that guy in the air-conditioned tractor now, but if they're out there in the heat all day, they probably shouldn't work a 12 or 15-hour day that first day. They need to work a 4 or 5, the next day or 2, 6, acclimate them over a week or two. I'm dead serious about this. The government is going to look at your plan and then look to see that you're actually doing it. Give workers shade. Here's the one that's going to get you. So if you look on their regulations, and if it's 90 degrees out, and there's a 60% humidity, and they're in the bright sunlight, the government requires you to give a 45-minute break every hour. You can't make this stuff up, friends. I'm telling you. They're dead serious. No, they're absolutely dead serious. And if it's hotter than that, you can't work that day. And then my old agency, the old wage and hour folks, say that 45-minute break has to be paid. Serious business. And we as an organization and as a agricultural entities need to get the word out on this and talk to your congressmen and senators, and Bob Redding, your friend, needs to work on that for you. You can't make that kind of stuff up. And I got a couple more minutes, so the last thing I want to talk about is increase the numerical count for H-2B workers. The 66,000 was done 40 years ago. Crazy. And they haven't upped it since. Now it's politics. You imagine that you're a congressman and you're in favor of peanut buying points having enough workers so that they're not subject to this 66,000 cap. So you're the congressman, right? How are you going to explain to your constituency that you want more foreign workers to come in and do the job that these Americans are willing to do if you just paid them enough? It's a tenuous situation we're in here on these guest worker programs and on your congressmen and senators being willing to help us with it, because they have to get reelected too. So it's a fine line that we're walking every day on all these things. I have, and you'll get in your packages later, some definitions and regulations that back up everything that I just said. Is all right here in black and white for you to look at. So that'll be coming to you. Any questions?